Welcome back to Walk with TFB. Tim Bryson here, and as y'all know, I'm a Black millennial who's eager to have an filtered conversation with authentic people centered on international education, global sport, and Black culture. Today, we have a guest on the show that, quite honestly, if you know about this guest, you know what to expect. If you do not know this guest quite yet, you're going to leave this conversation wanting to reach out on your own to learn more about their work, their story, and how they're continuing to shape the future of sport, both in the U.S. and globally. This individual currently serves as the international content manager for an NFL franchise, and whose responsibility is to really grow the fan base, right? Looking at fan engagement, brand identity, et cetera. Again, not just in the United States, but also globally. They're a graduate of TCU. Shout out to the Horned Frogs. As someone who truly brings, shout out to the Horned Frogs. Someone who brings an invaluable perspective, a very needed and necessary perspective to not just American football, but to, quite honestly, the sport industry as a whole. But without further ado, y'all help me welcome Maria Jose Rodriguez to the podcast. What's up, homie?
Tim, thank you so much. I just told you a little bit ago, you're making a dream come true for me today by having me as a guest on your podcast. First time doing this. I'm honored and I'm very excited to be joining you today.
Oh, we're glad to have you. We're very glad to have you. And I got to tell, there's only been a few other first timers. So y'all are in elite company, if you will. But this will be, you may do 100 episodes after this. This is going to be your favorite episode.
Can't wait.
Segment
Can't
one.
wait.
Segment one, MJ. So I think one of the things about this podcast that I know I like to make sure I center and prioritize is first learning more about people's story and recognize we can't get everyone's story in, of course, 20, 30, 40 minutes, but we can get a snapshot and really perspective and context that would then guide our conversation after that. So segment one. So for those who either know you or don't know you, MJ, what's your story?
So I am originally from Honduras. I was born in Tegucigalpa, that's the capital. Born and raised there until I was 18. I grew up going to bilingual school, so I started learning English since I was really, really young, which obviously has been key to in my life and in my success now. But yeah, I grew up, had a very normal childhood in Honduras. When I was 18, I moved to the US to TCU to go to college. That is a very common thing for people from Honduras to pursue higher education in just outside of the country. Um, and TCU did a great job. I believe they still do this. They recruit international students. So I remember them coming to my high school and just doing during a college fair presentation. And it was a common school for people from Honduras to go to. I kind of wanted to go somewhere where I wasn't going to experience as much as culture shock. And I thought Texas was a good transition and a good transition in between me. If I didn't know at that time if I was going to end up living in the US or not, but there is a high Hispanic population in Texas and at TCU specifically. So it was a school that just, caught my eye and such a special school, to be honest. I loved it. Fell in love with the campus visiting. I knew some people that went to TCU. Um, so I decided to go there. I went as an undeclared major. I wasn't sure what I was going to study. I knew I wanted something creative, but it wasn't until I moved to Texas and being at TCU that I really fell in love with football. I grew up watching sports. My family were big sports people, but mostly soccer in Honduras. That's what we grew up watching. We were into tennis as well and some football. I was familiar with it, but I couldn't tell you that I actually understood the game or that I, really knew what I was watching. But soccer was just the main thing. My brother played soccer, my sister did too. So it was always a big thing that brought my family together to this day. That's what we do whenever we're all together. We sit and watch whatever big sporting event is happening around the world. We cook something really good together and then we just hang out and enjoy our meal. So that's always been a big part of my life. When I go to TCU, I fell in love with communications, and they had a great program, advertising and PR. I just felt like I fit in there. It felt just natural to me being in that program. And I think it was 2015, if I'm not wrong, where TCU was top four in the nation, almost made the the college playoffs. And we lost to Baylor, I believe, and that, ruined our ranking. So we ended up in the fifth place. So we barely missed the college playoffs. That was just like such an incredible season and such a special thing to be a part of as a student. I went to every single game. I never missed a home game. I would even go by myself, and that's how I just fell in love with it. And sometimes my friends, they just want to be tailgating, and I was like, well, I'm not gonna miss this game, especially tickets were free for students. I wasn't not gonna take advantage of that. So I just remember being at a game one time by myself and just kind of like taking the environment in and just thinking, man, I want to do this. Like, I don't know, I'm not an athlete, I'm not a coach. I don't know how, but I just want to be in this environment. It was just so fun, competitive, obviously, just going through all the emotions of a game and just being so passionate over something. Just kind of something clicked being in that stadium, that game. And I went home, looked for jobs at the athletic department, and I applied for an unpaid internship, and I was working with athletics the week after that. So that's kind of how I started in sports and what sparked my interest in it. Personally, I am the youngest of three kids. I have a brother, older brother, and a sister. Um, my parents are in Honduras. My siblings are there as well. So I'm the only one from my core family living in the US. I do have family around the country, which is great that I get to see. Um, but yeah, I don't know if I'm missing any any part of myself here.
This is good. So just to clarify, you said TCU goes to Honduras to recruit.
Yes, they do.
That's phenomenal. And so, as an international student at TCU, talk to us more. My research on international athlete career developments is like green flags all over this. But talk to us more about your experience at TCU, both coming in. You mentioned wanting to mitigate culture shock, but then also like as you were navigating working in sports as an unpaid intern. Obviously, your friends who may not have been international are getting able to get paid in different ways. Just talk to us more about the experience at TCU for those who either did not go there and or are not familiar with the international student experience.
Yeah, it just felt like home, to be honest. Since I had a really good friend that was a student there. I have family in Texas, so I was visiting my family, and I decided to go visit TCU and stay with my friend that was already a student there. And I just saw the community that she had, her friends. I saw the campus. I saw just this like school spirit that I fell in love with. And it's a small school. It wasn't overwhelming like going to an SEC school that had big sports program, that would have been probably too overwhelming for me. It was just the perfect size, and with in my opinion, just enough diversity that it was, going to mitigate some of that culture shock, but also I was going to be exposed to being in Texas and in the US and other people. So I just thought it was a perfect mix of all of those things. It was, your normal typical application process, but the people that I met, they were just very welcoming. And I remember when I got accepted, it was very personal. They gave me a call. I just didn't get a card in the mail. They gave me a call to tell me that I had gone in. And I remember just like crying on the phone and being like, no way, I got in. And of course, and then a week after that, my acceptance letter came in the mail, which was really, really special. And it came in the mail. I still have this with me. I could text you a picture after, but it came in the mail with a letter that said something along the lines of, we're excited to have you here in both of our countries working together. And with a little pin that had the US flag and the Honduran flag.
Are you serious?
Yes, I still have that with me
Oh, this has
in
got
one
my
of my
brain.
drawers right next to me.
Oh, my brain. I'm in love right now. Okay, this is phenomenal. So, as you go through your college experience, right? At some point you mentioned the unpaid internship, got into the comm major, started studying common advertising. you knew you wanted to at least stay in the US, I'm assuming, and or work in sport. So as you were coming out of undergrad, talk to us more about like the job application process, when you secure employment. Like what was it like coming out of TCU?
It's the post college.
Post college, yep.
Let me think. So as an international student, I had to go through um employment permits. I believe that's
Mm-hmm.
called OPT, if I'm not wrong.
OPT. Yep.
OPT. So
Mm-hmm.
I had, once you get a US degree, you have the right to a year. Um, you have the right to a year. So I think let me think, man, this was a couple of years ago. It's been 7 years since I graduated. Um, so I used my year, right? I had that year of OPT. To be honest with you, applying to jobs that it was one of the questions for sure that would always come up, but in very few jobs it was a, hey, sorry, we try not to work with international students, or we want somebody that's a US citizen. But my experience with that wasn't as limited. I felt like most companies, or in the area that I was looking into at that time, they were pretty open-minded with that, because at that time I didn't think working in the NFL was achievable or something that was going to happen for me. So I was looking at advertising agencies, sports representation agencies. So I think agencies, for the most part, do a really good job at having a diverse group of people. Um, it's needed for what they do. So at least the agencies that I was looking at that time, it wasn't anything that was holding me back from getting hired. So I remember going through the process of multiple possible jobs, and then a little more backstory I didn't mention earlier. I had worked for the Steelers before during college as a summer intern during their training camp.
Yep.
And so I had met people before, when I was there over the summers, and we're here now. um, and I had met a couple people, of course, and I was 3 months, I believe, after I graduated. So I was unemployed for 3 months, and still had, interviews. I had things and opportunities kind of lined up, for the most part, in Texas. And I heard from a person that I worked with at the Steelers who's no longer with the team, but he said, like, hey, we're looking for somebody that speaks Spanish. Are you interested in applying in this position? And it was an internship role. Um, so the position at that time was already, not a long-term position. So um, I don't really know the other side of it, but I was qualified for the role. I went through the whole process of interviews. That initial conversation, my immigration status wasn't, of course you have to ask, but it wasn't, again, it wasn't something that would hold me back or anything.
Mm-hmm.
To this day,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, it hasn't.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so so yeah, within, I think, like 3 weeks, I got hired. Um, and it was simple as that. Honestly, it was very easy. Obviously, I was ready for it. I think I had gone through multiple interviews that at that time that probably prepared me for that one.
Yeah, for sure. So segment
Yeah.
two is I want to stay on that for a second. Segment two is really learning more about your role now. So as I shared in the
Okay.
intro, you currently serve as the international content manager for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And so for someone who may not know what that means, or may ask, "Hey, Maria, what do you do? What's your like? What are your responsibilities? Responsibilities, priorities? Like, what do you do in your role?"
Yeah, it's funny because it's hard to describe, because I wear multiple hats and I do a lot of things, because it is an area that is growing. So it is a blessing to be in this position, because I get to be a part of building that structure of what this will look like one day, because I've been the first person in my role at the Steelers and one of the first around the NFL. So we're learning a lot as we go, and it's a privilege to be able to do that, because it's a footprint that, as this whole thing grows, more people are going to follow, right? So it's very special, but it is hard to describe. Some people think I just translate things. Some people think I'm just tweeting on our Spanish social media account. But it's a lot of different things that come together for an international strategy. But I would say, if I could put in one sentence, it would be, I am a part of the global expansion strategy of the Steelers. And that has different components from media relations, social media, content creation, player relationships, and fan engagement.
Mm. So you mentioned obviously global expansion strategy, international strategy, but then also different, Spanish language social accounts. And so I'm thinking about how just people around the world consume content, right? How I consume content in Ohio may be different than Florida, US may be different than France, et cetera, et cetera. So how are you seeing, like, in your role, like how US Americans consume content versus how like Mexicans consume content, and how you choose to engage on different platforms?
It is very different. First, it's a little tougher because, for example, Mexico, which is our priority international market or one of our priorities, it's people are not as connected as we are in the US.
Mm.
For different reasons. I think just culturally, it's still not at that level. I think it's getting there where people have more access to that, but also just resources are limited in a way where Wi-Fi is still not unlimited as it is here.
Mm.
Prices for internet are still more expensive there. So it's just not as unlimited as it is in the US, but it was very interesting, specifically in Mexico and with football, how they keep up with everything. They're
Right.
like a local fan.
Yeah.
So it's a highly educated market. And that was really fun to learn because, there's so much you can do with that in a different language, right? So a lot of the things as I started were following what our English accounts were already doing. And then we kind of like, we started from there and we started to listen and pay attention what was working, what wasn't working. Um, but I would say there's peak times of things where certain pieces of content perform better. Typically, that's when people come home from work and they have the time to scroll through their social media accounts, so they're not consuming all day long.
Mm-hmm.
That was also good for my purposes because at that time, that just gives me time to prepare, the content that we're putting out every day. It doesn't have to be as real time as things happen in the US. And of course, we don't have a big team dedicated
Mm-hmm.
for our international. So it's nice to have a little bit more room to get things out.
That's a really good point. So you mentioned Mexico being one of the priority markets. I just saw recently Pittsburgh secured, I think, Northern Ireland, Republic of
Yes.
Ireland. What are you most excited about? Not thinking about what you'll do, but most excited about, given that Mexico and Ireland are obviously very different.
Yeah, so the Rooney family, the Steelers, owners, they are from Ireland. That's
Mm.
where their roots come from. So it's really special, of course, to just have that connection, right? And over the years, they've done a lot in that market. So it's special. It means a lot to the family. It means a lot to the team. It means a lot to the fans. Their heritage has been represented throughout the um I think through they do just so many different things with the Irish community. We have an Irish terrible towel. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just been something that, they've made sure to represent within the Steelers culture too. So it's just special to officially, be able to go into that market and have more impact. I'm excited to
Mm-hmm.
learn more about it because it is, very far from Honduras. It's not
Yeah.
Mexico is similar
Yeah.
to Honduras in a lot of ways. So it's just a very, very different culture for me. But also it is a small country and that hasn't been as exposed to football as Mexico has been over the years. So the strategy there is different and we're still navigating that, which is really cool to see how you approach different countries, with the same goal. It's just your approach is going to be different.
I literally want your job. Not your job, but like your job just sounds cool. Like like literally just sounds super like it's just anyone who listens to this podcast is gonna know like, oh, Tim is in like heaven right now because like this is literally what I
Oh,
get to think about every day. But you mentioned Mexico and of course Ireland. Are there other like markets or communities around the world that people would not think that Steelers have a very strong, loud, powerful fan base?
the Steelers really are worldwide.
Mhm.
There's just so many people. We see them at the games, we see them on social media. We started doing something very simple, where we'd post something every game and it said, let us know where you're watching from,
Wow, it's good.
just to learn where our fans are and just to, make our fans feel connected to the team or at least seen,
Yep.
or noticed. That's something that we learned that was special when we started doing things in Mexico. Everything that we were doing at first just was blowing up. And I think it was just because this fan base had existed for so long without being recognized or seen, that when we started to do that, it just meant so much to them. Um, so we kind of, we don't want to exclude anybody else, of course, but we started to do this, and I see it in Puerto Rico, in Brazil, in Colombia, in Germany. Honestly, it's just all over the world, but I would say the most surprising ones for me would be Asia,
Mm.
because that just seems very, very far away, or I don't even know when, just the time difference. How do you even make it work to be able to watch games? But big fan base in China. And I would say that's been one of the most surprising fan bases for me to see.
It's amazing. This is super amazing. You're trying to surprise me, especially because I thought it's primarily like NBA. I know NBA is a huge presence in China right now.
Yeah, I don't think, we're at the NBA level, but for sure,
Wow.
I would think they would consume all their attention, but there's people out there watching the Steelers and the NFL, which is incredible.
It is a strong fan base for sure. And I know that when doing research, of course, this last year, about September 22, the NFL wrote an article about you, featured you in an article, and it's entitled Next Woman Up, right? And so as you think, and you
Yeah.
mentioned earlier, right, there's not that many international content managers across the league. But as being one of the international content managers and being a woman in the NFL in particular, what does that mean to you? What was that mean? What made that mean to your family, to Honduras? Like, what does that mean to be one of the next women up, as they articulated on last year?
You know what? I think you're the first person to ask me that. Um, Honestly, now that you're asking me this, I've been so career driven and so like wanting to, accomplish one thing and then the next thing, that um I probably didn't even think about what it meant. I was just like happy to be seen and to be noticed. Um, and it felt like a big accomplishment for sure to be featured on NFL.com for what I'm doing. Um, but wow, you really got me with this one. It means a lot. It means honestly, it's just a blessing, I think, to be seen. I'm struggling putting into words. My family was for sure very proud. My friends were very proud. I kind of normalized it a little bit. I don't, I'm not too comfortable with attention, but I was for sure proud. Yeah, I think it was, now that you're telling me, I need to think more about it, honestly, because I just remembered even seeing the NFL request when they sent that in that they wanted to talk to me. I was like, why? This is cool, but why?
Mm,
Almost questioning it a little bit. But it is special for sure. Especially in this area that sometimes is overlooked. It might not be to you because this is what you're doing. But to your surprise, I don't know if you experienced this, but it is still overlooked, I think, especially in football. I don't think it's overlooked in other sports like soccer or basketball with the NBA already doing so many things for so many years internationally, but um, because it's overlooked, it did felt a little bit extra special because there's so many other women at the
hmm.
Steelers too that have been with the team for so many years, that could be highlighted for so many great things too that they do. Um, so it was an honor for sure.
It's a blessing, yo. And thank you for sharing that reflection in real time with us, for real. Because I think what you're saying, and probably one of our biggest frustrations is like obviously the world of sport is global. I think we're finally starting to realize that across many sports, which is a blessing. I think the men's World Cup, hopefully the women's World Cup in LA 28 will further like drive this point home when it's hosted across North America. But I'm thinking about like your role in particular. You mentioned there's others across the league who are serving in similar type of capacities. Like, are y'all connected? Like, what is y'all conversation like? Especially given that y'all, in many ways, for your respective organizations or franchises, are tasked to help grow a global fan base for a multi-billion-dollar industry, which is like, add that to your reflection when you
Yeah.
start thinking about this later. But like, that's like what? Like what?
I'm not gonna sleep at night.
Like
Kidding.
what is like what? That's what I'm saying. Your job is cool. Like what? But like yeah, like what is the community like across the league with other international content managers or similar like position?
Yeah, I haven't had the opportunity to meet everyone that's around the NFL, but the NFL does a really good job at connecting and bringing teams together. So we do have a monthly call with um teams that have international, either an international manager or an international team already. Every team is structured a little bit different. But any team that's starting to go into a market is typically on this call. So we've started to make connections. We normally don't interact as much, but at least we are familiar with each other. So whenever a question arises or if somebody's trying to do something, every now and then we'll see it. Somebody from the Texans is reaching out, hey, can you give us more insight on how you manage this project or things like that, and we're pretty open with that because at the end of the day, we're all different brands in different cities with different goals, right? Different things that set you apart, different people, different strategies. So, of course, we still compete. It's the NFL, and it's funny because, if you're in social media, you're competing with the other social media teams and you want to be
Mm-hmm.
the best one in the league. So, of course, it's competitive. So, we're competing, right? Which keeps things really fun too. But we also are honest and we keep it real with supporting each other and actual with like real resources, like, hey, this is somebody that can help you with what you're trying to do. This is our connection to how we managed our trip logistics or something like that. We're not and we do that too. When we started as well, we were reaching out to other people just for advice or just to find the right connections too.
This is good. It's really good. So I want to shift your perspective a little bit. It's probably impossible to do, but as a fan, right?
Okay.
And we just saw the London games conclude. We're about to watch the Frankfurt games. Pick up either this week or next week. But going back to London, like you're watching this as a fan, whether from a football standpoint, a social media standpoint, again, in your role, like what are you seeing now that again there's been established, presence in London for years now? Like what are you seeing? What questions are you asking as you're watching this in real time happen in London and see people from all over the world flock into London to watch this American football game, which is still mind blowing to think about.
What am I seeing as if I were a fan or in my role is
That's what I'm saying. It's gonna be hard to separate, but as you're like observing what's happening, like what are you thinking? So it could be either as a fan from a fan perspective, like your own role perspective, but as you're like digesting everything, it's like wow, like what,
yeah.
like you know what I mean? Like whoa,
You know what? I'm thinking about my TCU experience.
uh,
I'm thinking like this, I'm part of that community where something that you didn't grow up watching that's not necessarily a part of you is becoming a part of you. And it's so cool and it's so special and you want to be a part of it. Does that make sense?
makes a lot of sense. I mean, I went to South Carolina, and I remember going there freshman year, and I'll never forget this. And people were dressing up like with bow ties and black dresses and boots, cowboy boots, and I'm like, what's happening right now? Like literally. And then by the second game, I got a bow tie on.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And I'm like, oh, this is
yeah.
so now so yeah, I feel that 1,000%.
Yeah, so yeah, that's incredibly special. Same with me at TCU, like people with their cowboy boots and the purple.
Yep.
I probably would have never in my life wear that shade of purple. It's very loud. I love it
Yeah.
now, of course, but that love grew being there and just seeing it at the stadium and how fun it was to be a part of it. And I remember getting ready to go to games with my boots too and doing my
Mm-hmm.
hair and everything. It was just it was, almost like going to a wedding or something, going to
Mm-hmm.
every game. Um, but yeah, it's incredible to see just countries like London, the UK embracing
Mm-hmm.
the NFL the way they have. And I'm sure it's special for so many fans there, and now Germany and people that have gone to the games in Mexico, um, for something that you can just make a part of you that wasn't necessarily
Mm-hmm.
a part of you, Um, and it's really cool to see just different, like you were saying, different traditions that come in these places, here in Pittsburgh, or probably around the country, but you go to tailgate, and
Mm-hmm.
here in Pittsburgh, fans have their terrible towels on their tailgates, and they're making permani sandwiches before the
Yeah.
game. So everybody has their ritual, their routine. It's just cool to see how that, I guess, adapts in a different culture.
Mm-hmm.
What are you making? Are you tailgating? Are you, if those things translate and just adding to that whole experience? Whenever we host fans from Mexico, I know there's a big group that whenever they come up, they have a tailgate here and they're making tacos outside the stadium. So
Wow.
that's incredible because they're bringing something with them and they have Spanish music, they're dancing. That's completely different than what everybody else is doing around the stadium, but it's cool. So, just bringing your own traditions, the team's traditions to a different culture and adapting to what they want to do, what they want to eat, their music, their pregame rituals. I think just the mix of that is really interesting to me. I haven't had the opportunity to go to an international NFL game, but this is what I think about.
Man, I want to go so bad. And so you mentioned bringing Mexican fans to Pittsburgh, but you think about whether it be events that you've done in Mexico or global, any kinds pieces of content you created. Like, what's one moment in your current role or since your time at the Steelers that like sticks out as like that was cool or like that was super dope?
2 years ago, we took Najee Harris, our running back, to Mexico City. That was his
Mm-hmm.
first trip outside the country. We announced
Wow.
a live draft pick from Mexico City. Um, for the first time, we've done it twice now, and that was really cool. It was really cool to be there in the moment. The draft, it goes by really quickly. So
Mm-hmm.
I was getting information from my coworkers in Pittsburgh who were picking next because we were about to go live on like NFL Network and in a different country. We were making sure multiple things were like, you know, at the right time. And we needed to be on top of different things. So we had Najee and fans from Mexico ready to go to be a part of the shot. I had our draft card ready to write a name down to give it to Najee so that Najee could announce it. Najee was ready. He was nervous. So I was also trying to be like, hey, you're going to be okay, you know? And then we had our agency in Mexico helping us out with the camera and making sure we're ready to go whenever we got it. We also were connected with NFL
Hmm.
Network and they were
Hmm.
letting us know whenever we were about to go live, right? So multiple things happening at once. I see who we're picking. I write it down real quick and I give it to Najee. And just seeing all of that happen in a matter of seconds, and then looking at a TV and seeing that moment live on NFL Network was just really, really special. And then NFL Network pulled there's always a camera inside every team's draft room.
Hmm.
I don't know if you've noticed that, and you can see how they're working. They show it throughout the draft. So as I see it on TV, it's our shot, what I'm seeing in front of me. Najee announcing the live pick, and then they show a sign. They show a side to that, a shot from our scouts in Pittsburgh in the draft room looking at that moment in Mexico, and they were all clapping. So just a lot of things coming together that was it, and it all happened in a matter of seconds. It was incredible to be a part of.
That is, yes. I told you, you have a cool job. That is wild. And it was fans. I'm sure there was fans obviously watching in real time too.
Yes. So the response of all of that was incredible. And we were in a beautiful location in Mexico City. So you could see like an iconic like landmark in the background. And Najee said something in Spanish. He said Viva Mexico live on TV. And he has such a great personality. Of course, he made it even more special. Such a genuine, fun guy, genuinely excited to be there and to do this.
Hmm.
So it was just an incredible moment.
I got two more questions before we move to segment three. So
Yeah.
one thing I always speak about is like sport is a very copycat industry, right? So if one team does another team, whatever. And so we're watching the NBA, we're watching the NFL, invest in growing their global fan bases and whatnot. But I think now we're starting to see like college level start to like, flirt a little bit with this idea. Like Big 12 Mexico, of course, kicking off next year. South Carolina Notre Dame is playing in Paris in 2 weeks. So do you see like this like international content manager, international manager type of role or strategy making this in college sport?
Yes, and I think it's really important. Um, Especially with, flag football now being an Olympic sport and
Mm-hmm.
so many other just international things coming together. I think I think it's really important. I experienced it recently because we hosted a kicking clinic in Mexico a couple months ago. The goal of that was to scout Mexican talent. We had actually a Mexican kicker come to the Steelers during OTAs.
Mm-hmm.
So that experience of having him come to Pittsburgh, my role was key because I was in the middle of his interactions with some of his coaches. I was in the middle of his interactions with getting fitted for his equipment. I was in the middle of what he was doing with the media because he was getting a lot of attention. And then also in the middle of his personal needs, making sure that he was comfortable with his flights, that he personally had everything that he needed to come, and do this. And it's a lot of pressure on athletes, right? They're working their whole lives and mind and bodies for the opportunities that they get. And I learned that even though I wasn't necessarily the best person to be in between him and a coach, that was my very first time being in a meeting with a player and a coach. That was really cool for me to see, but I had to translate a lot of things. He was pretty good. His English was great, but certain terms or certain expressions just weren't making sense that I was assisting with, and just the comfort level of knowing that somebody from your culture or that understands your culture is there in such a big life moment. I felt really important. That actually has been one another really special day in my life that I was able to at least bring some ease into this experience for for this guy. And, that will go back to college or high school, or, especially if this is all growing, because if you're going to college in Mexico and then you're coming or transferring to a college in the US, or if you're coming straight from high school to Mexico, I experienced that, right? It's not easy to come into a different environment. So I had people obviously not in athletics, but that made that easier for me. You need somebody like that in athletics to do that and to help bring all these pieces together, because you're bringing somebody from another country. You're going to get media attention locally and from this country, right? You're going to want people from, to give you an example, like US Nike working with this athlete, but you never know if Nike Mexico is also going to want to work with him. You're going to have to work with different people out there. So, yeah, I think there needs to be somebody in the middle that brings it all together.
MJ, I'm laughing, smiling, because I literally just put it's a blog out today. And I said once, because there's been legislation being proposed for international athletes to monetize NIL. And I said once, if and when it's passed, international athletes will lead the way in NIL because of this double market, because they speak multiple languages, right? Because it's right there. And I'm like, and people, people are like, no, we don't think. I was all right. I'm trying to tell you. I'm trying to. And so the fact you just said it, without me having a prompt, I'm like, you know what? Mic drop. Mic drop. Mic drop.
Honestly, and you're so right with that, because yeah, you have the power locally and in your home country. And some of these brands like Nike, for example, they're global. So they have headquarters and people in different countries around the world. Pepsi, Gatorade, so yeah.
We'll be in, don't you worry,
That's incredible.
We'll be in touch. The last question before we go to segment 3. When you do return home, all right, or when you're on the phone with your family and friends back in Honduras, what questions are they asking you about either your role, sport in the US, the Steelers, like some thematic questions, like you know how to put anybody's business out there right now?
It's funny because a lot of people are still learning football in Honduras. It's growing. A lot of people, it's big to watch the Super Bowl, but I think that's all over the world. Everybody wants to see the show, who wins and stuff like that, but not a lot of people keep up with an actual full NFL season. So I get very generic questions. I get like, do you go to every game? Do you meet the players? Have you seen Tom Brady or Ben Roethlisberger? Like the guys that are, for the most part, worldwide known at this point. So it's just questions like that. Very few people come to me with like very specific things, or more football specific things. It's all kind of like questions like that. If I travel with a team, or about my job too, like what do I do specifically? But it's very I don't know what the word I'm trying to think, but I don't know, I can't think of the right word, but it's never too complicated, I guess, or it's just simple questions like that.
Makes sense. Well, segment 3, as we round this out, we talked about a lot about, again, your own personal experience, your career journey to this point, also excitement for the future, both in your role, but also for the league in itself. But MJ, how can our podcast community best support you as you move and walk along your purpose journey?
Honestly, I think you're already doing it. I think what I was saying before, a lot of this is overlooked, the potential of all of this, and people don't see it, and you just mentioned it. So just educating people with this, bringing people, in this specific area of the industry on your podcast, I think is incredible. I think you're already doing it. It's a lot of just getting it out there and talking about it and having these conversations.
Beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah, so keep it up.
I appreciate it. Anything else you want to share with the people before we head out?
I'm here. If anybody has any questions, reach out to me on Twitter, LinkedIn. If you couldn't tell, I'm very passionate about this. I'm honored to have talked about this with you. I'm super grateful, honestly. You really got me thinking about a lot of things. And honestly, things that I haven't even thought about too. Um, it's also been really cool to see somebody like you so interested in all of this stuff. So if anybody else out there is too, I'm sure you would be more than happy to connect with anyone, but I'm a resource as well.
I will be in touch. Don't worry. I got some other ideas. I'm gonna run ideas, not ideas, suggestions to run by you, not for your work, but for collaboration and things I'm thinking about now.
Honestly, if you're ever in Pittsburgh, let me know. There's a lot of good coffee shops here. You can go to Steelers game too, for sure. I'd be more than happy to. I'd be more than happy to join this podcast again too. It's been a lot of fun.
Maria Jose Rodriguez. Is that good? Decent?
Yes, that's perfect.
Let's go. I'm learning Spanish, yo. Again, I thank you for your time. Really did appreciate again learning more about you, your story, your work. I look forward to seeing what you'll continue to do in this industry, because people are gonna be coming for you very soon. People, if they haven't already, they're coming right now, yo. So thank you again for your time today.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Next time we'll do an episode in Spanish.
Claro.
Once you're
Claro.
once you officially
Podemoslo.
once you're officially fluent.
We can do that. Podemoslo.
Podemos hacerlo.
Podemos hacerlo. Bueno.
Sí.
See? Everyone else, man, thank y'all for tuning in to the episode of Walk with TFB. The next episode with MJ will be in Spanish. 2024. I'm calling it right now. I will invest in practice. But look forward to seeing y'all next week for another episode of our podcast. But as always, until then, we're walking. Peace out.